many times I've been crossed off the list and left for dead. So this ain't nothing new.
Robert! I've come to collect your head in a box, right here!
This is a man who sees in the dark. So watch out for surprise attacks.
You traveled all this way just to see me. I'm flattered.
Again!
When the chains come off, you go in the first 5 seconds.
What is happening?
Time's up.
Yeah, let's cut him loose.
Oh!
That was 5 seconds.
I like to be a man of my word.
Holy shit.
Hi, everyone, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and joining me once more, I have Steve Vivona. Say hi, Steve.
Hey, Carlos.
Today we are continuing with last week's coverage of San Diego Comic-Con. This time around, as I mentioned before, I have Steve. We don't have Tony here. But we are going to be hitting mostly non-comic book related material. This particular year, there were so many announcements, as we mentioned last time, comic book related announcements for films and television shows, that we had to devote pretty much an entire show just for that.
Yeah.
So this time around, we're going to look at the flip side of Comic-Con, and that is what nowadays Comic-Con has become, especially San Diego Comic-Con. More of an expo of all types of entertainment genres coming out to promote their shows. What we're talking about specifically here is non-comic book films and television. And sometimes some of these films are not exactly genre related, and the television shows, same thing. The atmosphere of Comic-Con has changed so much over the years that it's almost kind of like a film festival in terms of how many diverse type of films kind of show up there. I mean, it's not exactly, insane in terms of the range of film genres. It's still pretty much a pop culture, mecca for filmmakers. But every now and then you will see some guests or some presentations that you're like, wow, what does this have to do with Comic-Con? Steve, would you agree that sometimes some of these presentations or trailers or things that are being promoted have really nothing to do with the spirit, if you will, of Comic-Con?
They have nothing to do with comics. And also, I'm starting to see that they have nothing to do with genre. I mean, Breaking Bad, as much as I love it, does that need to be at Comic-Con?
Yeah, I feel the same way. Some of these shows, and like you mentioned, I love Breaking Bad. I love shows like Dexter.
Yeah.
But what's happening is a lot of these shows, they kind of see that the following, or at least the genre, they kind of start tippy-toeing around. It's beneficial for them to show up at these things. And what was unusual also is that, speaking of a show like Breaking Bad or even Dexter, these are shows that are finished. They're done. There's no more point, really, in promoting the shows. The shows are either in the process of finishing or about to finish right now. So it is kind of unusual that they would make a presence at Comic-Con this particular year at this particular time. Because you figured that channels like Showtime, AMC, they already sold, all of the commercial space that they have for these shows. There is no more promoting of the show. There is no point really in promoting the show because it's ending. So it's a little unusual that they're doing it. You would figure that they're doing it because it's a thank you for the fans, and by the showing of the stars of these particular shows being there and participating in a panel, thanking everybody and, kind of wrapping things up. I think to me, it kind of feels like a thank you for the fans. Now, what's interesting also is that in a lot of these panels, and we've talked about this last time, and it's going to happen again in this time during the show, is that they will show some exclusive clips, maybe even a trailer or two.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, these will not go on the internet right away. Some television shows are very interested in getting that material out there fast, or even a film. They're interested in maybe the following day putting the trailer up for everybody to see on YouTube, for example. But a lot of them don't. They don't want you to do that. While you're in the convention, they'll walk up and down the aisles and tell you, shut off your phones. Everybody shut off your phones. If they catch you with a phone, recording something, they're going to boot you out. But sometimes it still happens. People do record stuff. As a matter of fact, the Spider-Man panel apparently somebody posted the trailer they were watching. Now, it's unusual because the trailer wasn't completely finished. There were some animation shots that were not complete.
Yeah, and I did see that. That was great.
And what's most amazing about this trailer is the fact that it was on YouTube, and for all I know, it might still be up there.
Right.
And they didn't take it down. At least initially, they didn't take it down.
Yeah.
So it seems to me like it's a little pre-planned, maybe, where studios might want you to. It's almost like when a company leaks information to a journalist, a politician will leak a story to a journalist, but they don't want to be quoted. They're the ones who said it. It's kind of like something like that, where all of a sudden, a YouTube video pops up of somebody who recorded, a trailer that was being presented to a crowd, and the trailer stays up there. And you're like, wait a minute. These guys can just get on the phone, and in 2 seconds, they can call YouTube and say, guys, pull it. And they do. And they have. I've seen this a million times where somebody will post some kind of a trailer or something, and then the studio will pull it immediately. A few people get to see it, and then it goes away. But this time, this thing kind of lingered on, and it's like, to me, that tells me the studio doesn't mind, or maybe the studio planned it to begin with. They wanted to start it to generate some kind of buzz by let this trailer kind of leak out there. That's my theory. I don't know if it's true or not. Well, let's start hitting some of these films and television shows. Steve, why don't you begin with something that caught your eye during all these presentations?
Well, I think the one that I want to address first, and I don't know how many people are that interested in it, we'll find out very shortly, is Riddick, which is the third film in this, I guess you call it a trilogy. I don't know if they intended it to be a trilogy. I think they're just grateful that they have a third film. And this is the continuation of Pitch Black and the Chronicles of Riddick, with Vin Diesel and directed by David Twohy. Now, the story behind this film is very interesting because the last film in the series was 9 years ago, and it was not successful. Pitch Black, which I love, it was sort of
it was kind of like an independent little sci-fi film. It was no big hoopla about it, but it was great.
Yeah, it was terrific, and it really just came from out of nowhere, and who knew who Vin Diesel was, and David Twohy, to that point, I
think Keith David was probably the only pretty well-known actor in the film.
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely. But David Twohy, he had some genre credit. He had directed The Arrival with Charlie Sheen, which I don't know if you remember it, but it was a decent little sci-fi film.
Yeah, I remember that used to be on HBO every other day.
Yeah, but it was not great, not a classic, but it was, a well-done film. And he's also, since, in the midst of doing the Riddick films, he's directed a few other films that not huge hits, but very, interesting and just little films. One was called Below, and another was A Perfect Getaway. That was his most recent film. And they're both, they come and they go, but they're interesting, they're well made, and they don't seem to get a lot of press. But after the success of Pitch Black, they did Chronicles of Riddick, which was a much bigger budgeted film, and it was kind of bloated, and it was kind of...
Well, you could tell that the second one was more of a studio film.
Oh, yeah. And they went overboard with the story and the mythology and everything, and they really, whatever was charming about Pitch Black really kind of got lost in the mix with Chronicles of Riddick. So it looked like right then and there that the franchise was dead. But Vin Diesel... was so passionate about this character and this mythology that in the midst of his success with the Fast and Furious films, he kept petitioning Universal to let them do another Riddick. And basically they did say, well, okay, you finance it, you do all the work, and we'll distribute it. And that's pretty much what happened. They shot it on a very meager budget. And it's really, from the trailers and from the panel at Comic-Con, you can see that it's much more in tone and style, and I'm sure plot, like Pitch Black.
Right. To me, you get that feeling that they're trying to return to their roots. They want to get away from the second film as much as possible, and they are going back to the, hide and seek monster
Right.
aspect that the first one had, in terms of, it's him. They have to rely on him. There's a group of people that have to rely on him, even though they don't want to kind of help them from whatever is happening. So it's kind of like, everybody has to chip in to survive. A little bit of the, the 10 Little Indians type of thing, where they one by one, there's only a few left. And hopefully people will have a better reaction, to going back to this root material.
Definitely. I mean, I should say that I always enjoyed the character, even in the second film. I just like the way he plays the character. And I think, this is like the perfect Vin Diesel character. And just a few other interesting notes. Carl Urban, who had a pretty big role in the second film, is going to be in this film. You haven't seen him in any of the trailers, but he is going to be in this film. And they did sort of like an animated bridge story, that's going to kind of give you a sense of what happened between the two films. It's online. It's definitely on Vin Diesel's Facebook page. It might be on the Riddick Facebook page. It's an interesting style of animation that they use, but Carl Urban is in it. Like, he voices his character. And I think the role in this film is going to be more of a cameo. Much more interesting to genre fans, I think, is Katie Sackhoff is in this. And I think she's even admitted that she was cast purely to bring in the Battlestar fans.
Wow.
It's a very sort of up in the air question as to whether or not this film is going to do well, if this film is going to have an audience. Yeah. They're really pushing it kind of with that viral marketing, the way they did Serenity, and everybody thought, all the Firefly fans were going to come out and support this film, and there were going to be like 3 more, and that just fizzled. So obviously Vin Diesel and David Twohy have plans to do more if this one's successful, but we'll see. I think it looks really interesting, and I'm definitely going to see it in the theater. I hope it spawns more, it's hard to say.
And in a way, I'm also glad they're pushing it to later in the summer, like almost fall type of
Oh yeah, it's in September.
time frame, because this is, again, we talked about it before, blockbusters eat each other alive.
Oh,
Even
yeah.
good blockbusters eat each other alive. Something like this, I don't expect it to be a blockbuster. I expect it to be a quiet little fun film, kind of like a Looper or an Oblivion type of film. And it's a good idea. Set it aside, let it breathe a little off to the side.
Yeah.
So let's hope it works out.
Definitely.
Now, let me suggest the next film that we're going to talk about, and that is Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
And it's an interesting film because, obviously, aside from the fact that it's just the hopeful, American reboot of a Godzilla film, last time they tried it, they failed really bad
with
the Ronald Emmerich, Matthew Broderick vehicle, which, as a matter of fact, we do have a commentary of that coming in the near future of basically how much we despise that movie.
Like a Mystery Science Theater.
Exactly. But this time, they're taking another shot at it. They've been promising they're going to take a different approach to it. The director is a guy who's an independent kind of director, kind of new. His last film was something called Monsters, which was a cool little quiet, independent sci-fi film that didn't get, the light of day. But if you can catch it, usually like on Netflix or something like that, it's a really well-made film.
I saw it. I really enjoyed it.
It's a giant monster film, but they keep the giant monster kind of quiet. They don't go completely nuts like they did on like Cloverfield.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's a quiet kind of giant monster film. And I guess it makes sense as to why they decided to go with this director. Now, what do we know about the film so far as some of the stars and that sort of thing? Well, I know Bryan Cranston's in it, speaking of Breaking Bad.
Oh, there you go.
And the biggest thing that I remember, the biggest complaint that I remember about the last film was the fact that the monster did not look like Godzilla.
Oh, the design was terrible.
It was more like something from the Beast from 27 Phantoms. It was more of a dinosaur, 4-legged creature-looking thing at certain points. And from what little bits and pieces we've seen so far, they seem to be going back to the original art, the original concept look of Godzilla.
Yeah, which I think can only help them. I mean, that old design was terrible.
It can only help them, and at least it will bring the diehard fans back into the seats because, if it's going to turn into like some kind of a Jurassic Park looking thing, they're not going to go.
No.
Now, one of the things that's unusual, and it's one of those what came first, the chicken of the egg type of thing, is we're coming off right now of Pacific Rim.
Right.
Which is kind of like another way of reintroducing the giant monster movie into the general population. Godzilla is the godfather of giant monster movies. Even though you could say, well, Godzilla really did come from the Willis O'Brien's, Ray Harryhausen films. There was the Japanese version of that. But I think Godzilla was probably the first, man in a rubber suit kind of monster.
Yeah.
Because originally, like, if anybody can remember, they could not either afford or they couldn't do the stop motion animation they wanted, so they opted for the man in the rubber suit.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings back this whole, mythology of Godzilla trampling all over Japan. And I guess this is going to be more like an international thing in a way similar to Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
And I believe they've shown some short tidbits and small trailers and stuff. We haven't seen them yet, but the little tiny clips that they did reveal at least got you a quick look at his face. So you kind of know it's that familiar face.
Right.
And obviously you're dealing with modern special effects now. You're dealing with, the last film was released, I think, in the late 90s.
98.
Yeah. So, you're talking about almost 15 years, more or less, by the time this thing is released, of CGI technology, progressing to where it is now, which is a big leap from back then.
Right.
And, we'll see what happens. I'm interested. I'm definitely interested. And a movie like Pacific Rim, I think will help this film, to kind of generate a little more interest in this subgenre of sci-fi.
Yeah, I just think that, we've talked about, or we will talk about Pacific Rim on a future episode, and there's kind of been surprise amongst our people that it hasn't done as well as we think it should have. And I think Godzilla, with the name recognition and the design done right, I think it has a much, much better shot at, number one, doing better than the Roland Emmerich version, and number two, doing better than Pacific Rim.
Oh, yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. The Roland Emmerich version, the anticipation for that film, the promotion for that film,
it was crazy.
It was fantastic. People were going nuts. A great trailer, great teaser. It just fell apart. The movie just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
But again, who knows? Maybe this will kind of bounce itself back on Pacific Rim. Maybe if this film is successful, it will give the Pacific Rim people enough, negotiating power, I guess, to maybe continue with more Pacific Rim films and then in part maybe help more Godzilla films come along. Who the hell knows? I think a lot is riding on this film.
Yeah. As far as Pacific Rim goes, there's been a lot of chatter about the fact that it's doing so well internationally that it's almost, at this point, even, without Godzilla coming out, it's almost guaranteed a sequel, because in places like China and in Asia, the box office is insane.
Right.
So,
and that's another thing, like you mentioned before, this is something we talk about, this whole thing about international appeal.
Right.
And this is something you will hear when we do the Pacific Rim review.
Right.
Do you have any other films, Steve, comes to mind right now?
Well,
before we hit television?
No, actually, the only two other things I have were television. So if you
well, let me give you a couple of sample ones. Dawn of the Apes.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that.
They don't give us much. All we've seen so far is some behind the scenes shooting, like in a city, of guys wearing the CGI little ping pong balls, and they're running around like apes and climbing on cars, which is interesting. But obviously, we haven't really gotten any real, end product material to look at. They might have shown some at Comic-Con, but to the general population, we have not gotten that. From what I understand, the story takes place way beyond the years of where we left off last time. Caesar now is an older ape. You could apparently see it in some of the art designs they shown. He's all grayed, and there's basically two camps of surviving humans and surviving apes, who are kind of starting to have real conflicts with each other, over what's left of, of the planet.
Right.
Because the planet has been completely more or less wiped out by this flu type of disease that started in the first film as a result, ironically, of Caesar's mother.
Right.
Like I said before, we haven't really seen too much in terms of finished product because it's all CGI. I mean, these apes have to be done CGI style. So I don't think we're going to see even a teaser at this point. But I am definitely looking forward to it because, again, this was one of the films that last time around, I was very happy with the result.
Yeah, me too.
They planted a lot of seeds in the previous film. You saw the Icarus go up in the air.
I know.
You saw a lot of stuff that I'm sure at some point, whether this is a 2-film or a trilogy, I think they're shooting more for a trilogy, that Icarus is going to come down at some point and you're going to get something. I don't know if you're going to get a full-blown Planet of the Apes type of setting. I don't know. Or maybe that's how the whole trilogy ends, with the Icarus landing. Instead of the Statue of Liberty, it's going to be the Icarus crash landing into the planet, which is a great way to ending, if this is a trilogy, this particular trilogy.
Yeah. And the only thing that I would add, my anticipation for this film is just so high because Andy Serkis is just incredible. I mean, the guy, he needs an Academy Award just for his motion cap, whatever the hell however you define
They should,
his...
because in the past, when somebody does something so innovative, they give them a special Academy Award. Not only do they sometimes start a new category of Academy Awards, but I remember, like, I think it could have been Star Wars or something. They got Academy Awards for special sound effects.
Yeah.
And the type of awards that they were never given before, specially made for some innovative, and it's not one of those, we've handed these technical awards a week ago in some hotel that nobody knows with people who were hoping they would make the actual Academy Award ceremony.
Right.
No, this is the type of thing that it's here, it's not going away. The man is, obviously he didn't invent it, but he is the most experienced individual who performs these big ticket movies. And he's amazing.
Yeah, his talent is unparalleled.
Between the stuff he did for Lord of the Rings, the stuff he did for King Kong, and the stuff that he's doing now for, the 8 films, it's really good.
Yeah. And, he's also a phenomenal actor on his own.
That's right.
Not just with all this other stuff, but I mean, his facial expressions, the way he researches, the way these animals move and everything, it's just amazing.
Well, the other one I want to go over a little bit is a sci-fi flick called Ender's Game, based on a very popular book, from what I understand. And the big thing about this film, I mean, there is some controversy having to do with the author of the story saying some possible anti-gay comments of his personal views that seem to be haunting this film a little bit.
Yeah.
But the big thing about this film is it's Harrison Ford all of a sudden in a sci-fi. And it's weird because it's like, wait a minute, in sci-fi, Harrison Ford, it has to be Star Wars or Blade Runner. It can't be anything else. But no, he's got a pretty big role in this film. Ben Kingsley, who will hopefully redeem himself from Iron Man 3 in my view.
Yeah, mine too.
Even though he performed his part flawlessly in Iron Man 3, it was just a badly written thing that they gave him.
Yeah, it was a bad idea.
Here, he seems to be playing a pretty, hard-ass type of character. It's a kid's... I don't want to dismiss this as a, the Harry Potter, Twilight, the crowd, but it seems to be one of these based on a book that is really for kids or teenagers, and they're capitalizing on it. I mean, the other day I went to the movies, and all of a sudden there was 3 trailers. And it was kind of all the same. It was like Percy Jackson, and there was this other kids, and then there was 3 of them, and I couldn't even tell you which was which. It was all kids based on a book.
Well, let me ask you something just quickly.
Yes.
Is your son interested in any of this stuff? I mean, he's 14 now?
Yes, not too much. I mean, he's read some of these books, like the Percy Jackson stuff. He's read it. He's seen the DVD. We rented it, but we can't go to the movies to see that stuff. It's too expensive. You got to select your movies these days very particularly, especially, if you tack on a 3D on top and an IMAX on top, you're spending $20 to $25 a shot.
Oh, yeah.
So some of these movies, it's like, you know what? Just wait for the DVD.
Yeah.
Let's just save our money because it's just too nutty. But this film, I mean, it looks really interesting. The trailers are out there already. We could see them. I don't think there was any big gigantic reveal at Comic-Con.
Yeah, I think it's coming fairly soon.
Yeah, and it does have the potential to be something, hit or miss. It could be a complete bust, or it could be an interesting addition to the sci-fi genre.
I think what's interesting just about the fact, not only about the fact that Harrison Ford is in it, but the fact that Harrison Ford actually went to Comic-Con. Now, I mean, it's kind of a statement about his career. Years ago when the Indiana Jones movie was coming out, they did something like via satellite.
Yep.
You could say that, his career is not what it used to be. And, I mean, all anybody wanted to talk about was Star Wars.
Right. Well, he's the kind of actor, if we go back to your favorites, your Stallones and your Willises.
Yep.
He's the type of actor that every now and then you'll see something on video with his name on it, and you're like, what is that?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing any ads for that. What is that? And I don't know if you can call them straight to DVD, but it's like, it's almost straight to DVD because it's like, it might have been in the theater for 20 minutes.
Exactly.
But he's adjusting to it. He realizes, I guess, he's still a grumpy old man, but he understands that if he wants to keep that cash flow coming in, those millions and millions of dollars, he's got to do a little extra song and dance for them anymore. He can't just be the genius auteur who just doesn't speak.
Right.
Now he just basically goes around dodging Star Wars and Indiana Jones questions.
Exactly.
But he can still cash the check, so that keeps him going.
Exactly.
Let me throw another movie at you that you might be a little more familiar with, and that is RoboCop. They're redoing RoboCop. It's very interesting. The casting, they're tweaking the story from what I understand a little bit. Even Samuel Jackson is in it, playing a character that we have not seen before. He described it as he plays a combination of Rush Limbaugh and Al Sharpton.
Oh, Jesus.
A television political type of person who is very pro automated defense mechanisms. You know, the Ed 109s, you know, from the previous films, whatever they call them on this one. Egg 209. Yeah. So,
and also Michael Keaton is in it.
Michael Keaton plays the baddie, I think. And the star, obviously not Peter Weller, but it's the guy, I forget his name, but it's the guy from The Killing.
I believe his name is Joel Kinnaman.
Ah, that sounds familiar. I love that actor. He plays such a good, rich character in The Killing.
He's a great actor, but I'm just not feeling this.
Yeah, I've only seen him once or twice on films because he usually has very small roles. But I have a feeling he's going to really do a good job here.
You think so? I mean, well, I don't know. I see the suit and I just want to cringe.
Yeah, the suit looks almost nothing. The suit looks like something out of G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
But, you know, let's wait. We haven't theoretically seen any footage yet.
No.
Except, you know, obviously the people that were there probably saw some little bits and pieces, but I'll make my decision later when I actually see something. This is one of those films that I'm secretly hoping it's good.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so.
Because, I mean, I'm such a fan of the original film. The sequels, I'm not very happy with. And the TV show, you can keep that too.
Yeah.
Who knows where that will go. One more movie I want to hit you up with is one that I really had very little idea that it was in the works or that was going on or anything. It's a movie that was originally called All You Need Is Kill. And now they renamed it Edge of Tomorrow, which is apparently a huge Tom Cruise vehicle.
Yes.
And I don't know much about it.
Me neither.
All I know is there's a poster of him running in what appears to be some kind of mechanical armor suit that looks like something out of Elysium.
I mean, he was at Comic-Con, wasn't he?
He was there. I think he might have been promoting this film.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what the heck this is about. And it's kind of like a quiet film. Now, granted, I don't think it's coming out till next year anyway, so they have plenty of time to promote it properly and start giving us some little bits and pieces. But it's like, wow, this guy just doesn't stop. He's like a working machine. And
he's got to pay off his child support now.
Of course, but he seems to be, I don't want to say settling, but he's pretty comfortable in the genre. I mean, like I said, you know, between Mission Impossible and Oblivion and now this other film, he's like, I'm surprised he's not doing like some heavy drama or comedy. I know,
but he was always comfortable in sci-fi. I mean, Minority Report I enjoyed that very much. That was an excellent
film, yeah. You know, they also, but we've already seen these ahead of time. You know, the next Hunger Games Catching Fire film is about to come out. The trailer was already released. They had their own panel there and this and that, so I don't think there was anything too earth-shattering.
Yeah.
Again, this is, you know, it's the exception to the rule as far as I'm concerned. This looks like anybody who hasn't seen the film. It's one of these books for young adults that turn into movies.
And I know you've told me about them, and I'm still like, no.
I haven't read any books. All I did was watch the movie, and the movie surprised me in terms of, wow, it's not a Twilighty, Harry Pottery feel. This is some serious, nasty stuff. And for genre fans, I think we might have talked about this before. If you ever seen a movie called Battle Royale,
which I have,
you are going to find some very close connections. Obviously, they're not going to take it that far, but the implications are there.
Right.
You cannot get away with the implications that it's, you know, it's a battle to the death. Mm-hmm. And no matter how young these kids are, they got to die or else you don't win.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an undercurrent of very serious, nasty stuff that I think makes this, at least so far, this series a notch above your typical, you know, teeny boppery crap that, you know, some of these Twilighty, Percy Jackson films, Heavenly Creatures, you know, all that crap that went nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more for adults. And I am looking forward to the sequel. I'm pretty sure it's a trilogy, but I'm really interested. The trailer looked pretty good. So, but anyway, let's go towards the television side because the television promotion machine at Comic-Con is just as big, if not bigger, than the film. I mean, these panels, these presentations, you know, they view footage and secret this and secret that.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you start with one of your biggies?
Well, I hate to, you know, say it, but we have to go back into comic book land just for a little while and talk about Arrow.
That's right.
Which is going to go into its second season, and they had a big panel and big promotion for the second season. It was definitely a huge hit for the CW. Based on what they said at the panel, they're really going to be deeply entering the mythology of the comic, which they already started to do in season 1, but they're really going to start bringing in some more characters from the comic. especially, which I'm sure everybody's very excited about, the Black Canary, who was the love interest / partner for the Green Arrow in the comic. But it's a little confusing because they're pulling a little bit of a Smallville here in terms of, remember the deal in Smallville with Jimmy Olsen? How he really wasn't Jimmy Olsen?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Remember at the end? You know, it's like he was Jimmy Olsen, but then like in the flash forward, the real Jimmy Olsen was there. In this one, his love interest, ex-girlfriend, future, you know, whatever, she's the character who becomes the Black Canary. But they're introducing the Black Canary in the second season, and they showed a trailer, and they, you know,
Like two separate characters.
yeah, so it's confusing to the audience somewhat, and they're playing a little fast and loose with the mythology of the comic, but they've done that already in this series with a character called Deathstroke, who they've introduced, but the identity, the person who is Deathstroke, has also been introduced, and they're not the same character. So it's like, what are you doing? But they say that, you know, that it's all going to make sense at some point. I have a feeling this is going to be like a 7 or God knows 10-year run for, you know, this show as it was for Smallville. The interesting thing also that came out of this panel is John Barrowman, who genre fans know as Captain Jack from Torchwood, and who was one of the primary villains of the first season of Arrow, and who supposedly died at the end. He also plays the character, the Dark Archer. He showed up at the panel, and they do a sort of a Lost thing where every episode has like an A and a B story and a flashback. So I'm not sure if he's going to be, you know, going into the flashback story or if, you know, he's really not dead. Who knows? They're also going to expand the role of his other future partner, Speedy, who's like his Robin. They've already introduced the character. His name is Roy Harper. And yeah, it's very heavy with characters from the comic. And I don't know if he's going to become his partner just yet, or if they're going to like sit on him for a while and just let the character breathe a little and grow into the role. Maybe somewhere down the line, season 3, season 4, become, you know, another Archer. But yeah, I mean, they really are pulling out all the stops with the show. It's just been an enormous success. I'm very excited. As a comic book fan, I'm just thrilled that they're bringing in more and more elements from the comic instead of trying to create their own, because there's so much there to use. I'm excited about it.
Well, another show, and actually I'm going to hit it as 3 shows because we've talked about them in the past almost as a series of 3 shows, are the combination of Bates Motel, Hannibal, and The Following, which we talked about in the past, how these shows are a little similar and weird and creepy. Obviously, Bates Motel gets another season just like these other shows do. From what I said, they talked about, you know, the possible changes and switches and relationships and deaths that are going to occur in the second season. It's a show that I'm very interested in. They played at Comic-Con this little behind the scenes kind of video making fun of the actor that plays Norman showing up, and he's not happy with the fact that the one that plays the mother seems to be getting a lot of attention now because of her acting roles, you know, all the accolades she's been getting for other roles she's been having. And he's kind of like jealous of the fact that mother is getting the attention type of thing. And they do this whole funny little behind the scenes thing in California in the real Psycho set.
Oh, wow.
So I would suggest if you guys, you know, anybody who's a fan of the show, go and look for it. It's really funny. Hannibal, another show we are interested in.
I love Hannibal.
They're continuing it, obviously. And they're, from what I understand, they're going to pick it up right where they left off. Graham is in jail. And Hannibal is kind of like watching over him. He's his doctor. It's a complete role reversal type of a scenario from what we're used to in the films. Now, I'm not sure how long they're going to keep that up. That might be maybe a few episodes, but they are exploring that a little bit now, you know, having him deal with his problems, because up to now, Graham doesn't seem to be in as control of his gifts, of his, I don't want to say powers, because it's not really supernatural, but he's not in control of what he does as he was in the movies. The movies, there was this darkness around them, but he had it kind of under control, but they always talked about how he had some problems in the past and he kind of lost himself.
Right.
I think this is what they're exploring in the TV show, is that they're kind of giving you the background of how bad it got for him before he kind of reined it all in. So that's the type of stuff I think we're going to be seeing. And the third show that I mentioned was The Following, a show that we talked about also that we were watching, and that it ended with a, you know, like a complete massacring of just about all the characters almost. Yeah. And obviously Kevin Bacon has to come back because that's his show. You know, he's going to come back. The big bad guy apparently made an appearance, and
he was at the panel, James Purefoy.
He was at the panel and he is coming back. So I don't understand how they're going to work that out.
I think it's safe to say that, and I will at some point get to Bates Motel. I love Hannibal. I think it's safe to say that The Following is the weakest of the three.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with Steve.
Yeah. And it's too bad Tony isn't here because I know he loves these three shows so much.
Well, that's when we started talking about him. He just made a run for it, didn't he?
Yeah, he locked himself in the bathroom and,
I thought he threw himself into traffic.
Yeah. That's why he's not here.
But again, I don't like to lump them together, but they are kind of like the creepy shows.
Yeah.
The creepy, not necessarily, Showtime-y, HBO-y. They're, A&E is not exactly HBO, but...
No, and the two of the shows are network shows, but
Yes.
what they all have in common is they're all doing the short 13-episode seasons.
Great idea. I wish a lot of these other shows would adopt the English model,
too.
if you will, because it forces them to be more clear and they don't have to dilute their product so much.
Exactly.
How about you? Give me another show.
Well, the only other show that, was at Comic-Con that I'm excited about for many reasons is Doctor Who.
Yes.
They had a big presence there, and Matt Smith and Jenna Louise Coleman were there, as was Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, who's one of the writers, who they also work on Sherlock, which I guess is something we should also mention. But
Well, they were kind of promoting that too. They had some little videos here and there.
yes, but they didn't have the stars at the panel.
No.
But for Doctor Who, the big, huge anticipation is the 50th anniversary episode, which is in November. Everybody also knows that Matt Smith is leaving the role, and there's going to be a huge announcement about his successor. But that was not happening at Comic-Con.
Right.
It was sort of a farewell for him and Moffat. He is a master at hiding information and keeping things quiet. So little has leaked out about the 50th anniversary episode. And in fact, all the times that he's really tried to surprise the audience, for some reason he's succeeded where other shows and movies have failed. But there's going to be a huge 50th anniversary episode, and I believe also a Christmas episode too.
Well, it's almost like a double whammy. Like,
yeah.
Normally they were just preparing themselves for the 50th anniversary and the hoopla surrounding that. And then at the last minute, unexpectedly, because from what I understand, up to the last minute, Matt Smith was going to come back.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, it was like, he's not coming back. What? So
Right.
all of a sudden,
I
they
was
have
shocked.
a double whammy there.
Yeah. So one of the things that they have really been keeping under wraps, and I think it's a little bit of misdirection on the part of Stephen Moffat and possibly some of the actors, is the fact that while everybody knows that David Tennant and Billy Piper are going to be in this, Moffat and other former doctors have said, no, they haven't called us. They think we're too old. We don't look like we used to look, blah, blah, blah. But more lately than at Comic-Con, there has been buzz that at least one, possibly two or three other former doctors will be in this episode.
Well, let's just hope it doesn't turn into the James Bond reunion we were supposed to get at the Oscars.
Well, I mean, this is like within the context of the story, and Christopher Eccleston, I'm sure he's the one that's not going to be in it, but the one I think that everybody is most interested in seeing is Paul McGann, who was the 8th Doctor, who was in the Fox TV movie that didn't go anywhere. And there's been a lot of buzz. And also because he's the one that still looks like he used to look.
Oh, okay.
So he might be in there as sort of a bridge character. They're even talking about like doing a mini-sode or a webisode of him showing his regeneration into the John Hurt character that we saw at the end of the 7th season. One other thing that's interesting, BBC is doing a movie about the Doctor Who show, which is called Adventures in Space and Time, which is going to have David Bradley, who is the actor who played Walder Frey in Game of Thrones, who orchestrated the Red Wedding. He's playing William Hartnell, the first Doctor, in this movie. So I'm very interested in that as well, because then you're going to see how the show was created in the early 60s and all the major players, producers, writers, and whatever. So that's also going to come around the time of the 50th anniversary special.
Wow. So, yeah, that would be interesting.
We all know now that the 12th Doctor is going to be played by Peter Capaldi, who is an interesting choice. He's 55 years old. He's quite a bit older than Matt Smith, and he's a veteran of British television and film. He's been acting, for probably over 30 years in Britain primarily, and he's guest starred on Doctor Who and Torchwood a couple of times, and he's had some starring roles on British shows such as The Thick of It and most recently The Hour. So very interesting choice, much older choice than Matt Smith, but I'm looking forward to it.
Like I said before, we thought it was going to be a big event as it was, but it seems to be getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do they top themselves, with so much news coming out and specials and, like you said, film and all this stuff? It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And as we said before, also, some of these people are associated with Sherlock. They had a little video presentation of the actor who plays Sherlock, Cumberbatch,
Yep.
doing this whole little thing about, like, he's going to reveal some secrets, and then the video would cut out and stuff like that would happen every time. That was really funny. Again, look for it. It's on our Facebook page. We have it there. We have links to all that stuff.
Right.
And obviously, no big spoiler here. The guy who plays Sherlock is coming back. He did not die. We all know he didn't die. The season ended with him plummeting to his death. And it's kind of like, but you know what? He can't die because then the show would be over. So, the interesting thing is figuring out how he gets out of that jam, how he made it out of that plummet to his death. So that would be interesting. I can't wait. I love that show. Too bad there's so little of it. I know we like the English format of 12, 13 episodes, but with Sherlock, it's not even that.
Oh, it's only
with Sherlock,
3.
It's like 3 very long episodes, like 90-minute episodes. So it's really half a season if you think about it, more or less. They're not even getting the full shebang there. Let me throw a show that I knew absolutely nothing about, that apparently they made some announcements during Comic-Con. And this is a show that was developed by Ronald Moore, the guy from Battlestar Galactica, that Sci-Fi Channel is picking up, called Helix.
Uh-huh.
And again, you tell me a sci-fi show on Sci-Fi Channel, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I lost my hope in Sci-Fi Channel. Once Galactica ended, the rest of the shows for me are like, yeah, okay, next.
Yeah, Warehouse 13.
It's all Sharknado to me.
Yeah.
But here's the concept that really interested me, and I know you are going to know exactly why. This is apparently a group of like CDC scientists trying to quarantine and trace some kind of a outbreak that's coming, and it takes place in the Arctic. So I'm like, woo, wait a minute, Arctic?
Yeah, but it's Ron Moore, first of all.
Of course. So, I'm going to listen to it, I'm going to pay attention to what he says. And it seems to have a little bit of the Thing vibe. The people in a very desolate environment trying to solve some big mystery with things going wrong. It's like, okay, you got my attention. Let's see what you can give me now. That is one that I'm really interested in. And you also have one that we're going to probably talk about in more detail in a future episode. But the fact that they made the news, we have to mention it here, and that is Once Upon a Time has apparently cast Naveen Andrews from Lost.
Yeah, that's Once Upon a Time in Wonderland.
And they also said something about Little Mermaids coming.
Yes.
So
that's the thing on Once Upon a Time. I could be wrong. I might be confusing the two. I'm not sure.
And like I said before, this is Tony's show. This is the stuff Tony's going to really... By the time we do that show, by the time we get to the False Recap show, hopefully we'll have more information exactly about what that's about.
Yeah.
Because these lost people keep showing up in this show.
Yeah.
And they seem to be getting closer and closer all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's tons and tons more stuff that they've talked about. But obviously, with these things, they don't give you that much information. A lot of them, they might not have enough footage to show you and that sort of thing. And believe me, there's a lot of stuff that we already are dealing with. It's hard to really keep track of all this information. But at least we have somewhat of an idea of what's coming down the pike. And not only with existing shows that we're keeping up with, a lot of shows are ending. We talked about it earlier. Dexter's ending. Breaking Bad is ending. So, these shows, they made a Comic-Con presence, but it was kind of like a wind-down presence.
Yep.
But as more news trickles along, would remind you guys, once again, go to our Facebook website, go to our regular website. In Facebook, we'll give you all the updates of any kind of news we find, anything that trickles in. We'll throw it out there for people to digest a little bit at a time. And I would like to thank, obviously, Steve for helping me finish off this San Diego Comic-Con. We've been doing it for quite a number of years now.
Yeah, I think the third year in a row.
Our predictions of what's going to be good and what's not going to be good and what we hope will be good and how often we're disappointed with things. So, on behalf of everybody here, I would like to thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next time on Geek Fest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
One day, I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing.
You're serious, aren't you?
About what I do, yes. Not necessarily the way I do it.
There's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes. It's always something to look at if you open your eyes.
10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really corrupt.
Every great
decision creates ripples. Like a huge boulder dropped in a lake.
How does it feel? It's all back there.
What I did without choice.
I've got 5 billion languages and you haven't got one way of stopping them.
I'm old enough to know that a longer life is always a better one. I am definitely a madman with wrongs.
My name is Peter Capaldi. I'm the Doctor.
Stop. I agree with Steve.